Welcome back to Live the Width of Your Life podcast. This is a very special conversation because I have my dear friend Lorraine Schuchart here, and we're actually doing a joint podcast today talking about the things that we are so incredibly interested and passionate about. Alignment. So, Lorraine, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this conversation, Aneta. And of course, my podcast is called Brand for Good. And I help people find alignment externally with their messaging and their brand, whereas you do the inside work. And so there's a little bit of overlap because I talk about brand excavation as soul excavation, and we really go deep. But I love the fact that in an ideal world, people would work with you and then work with me, and it would make my work so much easier and feel so natural to people.
It's so good. And so you and I, the way this came to be, I love to provide the background, is we met on LinkedIn. And I am loving the new relationships that I've developed through LinkedIn, not because we were trying to sell something to one another, but I think just because we have mutual friends in common. We started really aligning with each other's messages. I got to come to a conference that you put on, that you facilitated, met you
Right?
in person, which is always weird when you meet someone
It
after like a
is.
year of
It is.
following them. And then it was so awesome because you were exactly as I imagined that you would be, actually
Oh,
funnier, like all the professional and the wise and all the amazing things, and like super vibrant, but also really funny, which I
thank
appreciated that
you.
LinkedIn.
I love that we're multifaceted, right? And so I am more serious in my writing, especially on LinkedIn. I want to be a trusted advisor, but I also want to be human and say that I'm here for relationships. And that's how we got to be friendly on LinkedIn. It was lovely to meet you in person too. And I do feel like writing, when it's from the heart, it does give you an accurate anticipation of who a person is, but then you see all the other facets of them in real life, which is such a joy.
It really is. It's so nice. And I'm so grateful that we have opportunities to be in person again, do more events, and really build relationships outside of just Zoom or Teams. And so that's been a joy, and something that I'm holding myself accountable for is actually spending more time outside of online with people, especially with women this
Yes.
year.
Yes, me too. And it's really interesting because it wasn't a goal that I stated as a New Year's resolution or anything like that, but it was more a tug. I was being tugged to have more in-person conversations, or even, like, I call them virtual coffees. Getting on Zoom, if that's your only choice. I mean, it's been single digits here in Cleveland, so people are not real excited about going out, but you can still do the virtual coffees that are one-to-one and then meet people out as we break freezing. But yeah, it's just been something that I just am really craving, and I think a lot of women are.
I would love for you to just share with my audience, because if this is the first time that they're interacting with you or listening, a little bit more about Prosper for Purpose, and what does it mean to be a brand strategist? What does it look like when people hire you and they work with you?
Right. Thank you. So, Prosper for Purpose is my agency, and we talk about building category of one brands for individuals and organizations. And basically, what that means is you're not the celebrity name necessarily, but what I love to do is work with my clients to find out what is unique about them and their business and help them articulate that in a way that the right people that should be working with them can find them and distinguish them from all their peers in the market. And as an agency, working with us starts with really an understanding and an assessment of who you are, what your company is, what you stand for, and then looking at how that's currently showing up in your marketing and your online presence. What does the copy on your website look like? Are you saying publicly what you say in a conversation? And how do we pull the essence of what is so unique, special about you? I compare it to a recipe. Like, we all have chocolate chip cookie recipes, right? But very few are exactly the same. Some people add cinnamon, some people add oatmeal, some people add nuts, some people like them big and chewy, and other people like them thin and crispy. So everyone has their own recipe. So what's your unique recipe? And then from there, we figure out what are the platforms that they should show up on where they're most likely to reach those people that they feel called to serve. And we help them do that. So my background is as a PR strategist. And I worked in corporate and I worked in nonprofit and really loved the mission and being tied to that of a nonprofit. But I really loved the pace of working in a corporate setting because it really teaches people to trust their gut. If you make a mistake, you move forward, you don't get, stalled. And I wanted to bring that intersection to my business. So when I started my business in 2013, I decided to call it Prosper for Purpose. So do well so you can do more good. And that's what the name stands for. And so today we meet people along the way. Maybe they have a brand and it is pretty well articulated, but they're not really out there. And we figure out, is social media your platform? Is Substack your platform? Should you be on podcasts and giving talks and things like that? And then we help them either implement that or we create the strategy and hand it off to their team to implement.
Mm. That is so needed because I know when I first started my business, I just really struggled with what is my brand? I don't know if it's like in corporate, spending so much time there, I felt like maybe I took on a persona that was going to allow me to be successful within that space. And then now saying, actually, who am I outside of that? And what is my voice? And how do I want to present myself? What do I actually even want to wear? Just like
Yes.
basic things. On what platforms do I want to be on? Can I put myself out there when before we were told not to? All of those things that you talked about, they were just things that I sweat. Like I just didn't know what to do about it. And I still think today, I feel like this needs to be something that I'm going through again and again. So when you work with clients, do they come in for a tune-up like every
Yes.
couple of years or so? What does that look like?
So my advice is every 3 years. And so what I tell people is you are a human being becoming. We're
Mm-hmm.
all evolving. So it is natural that your brand and your business will reflect that. And so as you're going through your own changes every 3 years, you may do something significant and you say, should this affect my brand? And sure, reaching out to someone that you trust to say either, yeah, we can tweak things a little bit, or no, you're good, this fits. And it really starts with building the right foundation. So I say prosper for purpose. I could bring so many other things into that. And I have plans to bring a couple new services into my offerings, but it really encompasses what I stand for and what my business will stand for, regardless of the services that we offer. But every 3 years, we're just about ready to launch our new website. I've rewritten the copy to position us where we are now. It's actually been 4 years because this one's been a year in the making. But I think it's just really important to really take an assessment of yourself and your business and make sure it's aligned.
Yeah. It's so good and actually makes me feel I need to do this right now again because I do feel we are changing constantly and just saying what identity am I stepping into? And we learn a lot in the process. And so it seems like it's a timely conversation right now for me. But going back to when you decided to leave your career and start your own business, were you scared to do it? Or was there a catalyst that prompted you to think, okay, maybe it's time that I take a
Yes.
chance on myself?
Yeah. So I was a reluctant entrepreneur. I am that person that never dreamed of doing my own thing. However, throughout my career, I found myself freelancing. People would say, you do this. Hey, could you write a radio spot for me? And I had a background both in PR and advertising copywriting. And it was really interesting. And I think I was just so well served by that copywriting experience. So I went through my career freelancing, not wanting to be an entrepreneur. And where I ended up was I left a good job where I wasn't going to be able to affect any more change. I felt like I kind of hit a wall, but I really liked it and went to a place where I thought I was going to be able to make a big change. And it ended up being a very toxic environment. And I stayed way too long trying to protect my team and kind of shelter them from what was actually happening, and reached a point where I couldn't do that any longer. So I started planning my business. And ironically, I was asked to leave. because they brought someone new in and she had her own ideas about how she wanted to run things. And I was given a little parachute. It was very small, but it was just enough to start my business. So I left in November of 2012 and launched my business in January of 2013. And it was just really a godsend. But I could have found another job, and I looked for another job while I was still there. I couldn't find a place I wanted to work. And my daughters both encouraged me, like, you have this vision. You're always talking about what's wrong with nonprofits or what you would change about nonprofits, what you would change about corporate. Why don't you just do that? One of my daughters was through college, the other one was there. And so I just took a chance and did it. I thought I can always go back to work, but I found I really loved it. And my message of being a business that was using my work to create positive impact in the world really resonated with people. And we got a lot of great clients right that first year, which was great.
It's so interesting you called yourself reluctant entrepreneur. I always felt that way myself too, because I knew I didn't want to stay in banking, but I wasn't sure what was next. There was so much fear, I think, around entrepreneurship. I think I always felt maybe you had to be born that way or have a desire or want to take risks. But I think I looked around and I was like, I don't think that any other place exists where I'd want to work. So let me just try this on my own. So I guess I would kind of call myself the same thing.
Love that. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about starting your business and what inspired you and why you chose the lane that you did.
Yeah, I was in corporate 25 years, banking 22. And I knew I didn't want to retire from it. My kids were finally at the age where one was in college, one was going to college. And I don't know, I did my MBA. Like I did all the stuff and
Right.
I worked for amazing leaders. I had really cool projects and I just looked around and I thought, oh, I don't know. I just don't think that there's anything else here, but I wasn't sure. So I hired a coach and I think it was during the coaching phase. Like I worked with my coach for 6 months and I just wanted to figure out, did I want to go into nonprofit? Because I was also like very mission driven. I want to help people. I want to feel there's a greater connection between the work that I do, like seeing a change in someone's life. So I thought maybe
Yeah.
nonprofit, or is there a different industry? Maybe there's something else that allows me to also be creative because I feel like I was creative and I wanted to maybe leverage some of the other skills that I didn't necessarily get to use all the time at work. But I fell in love with the coaching process. I'm such a nerd. Like I always loved learning. And so I loved assessments and I loved reflection and I loved all the journal prompts and I loved going deeper and creating a vision board. All these things, they just spoke to me so much. And we did the work. I was like, well, what would it look like if I were to have a coaching business? What would I want to focus on? And for me, since my 20s, I had practiced yoga and meditation for a really long time. I was always very curious about mindfulness, about Eastern practices. I had very strong, still have really strong faith, my own faith. And so, really focusing in on just a strong spiritual connection to God. And I knew I wanted to write books. Like, I've always wanted to write books. I loved traveling. So, I thought, wow, it would be great to maybe do retreats. So, the more I opened myself up to what could this actually be, the more excited I got. And when I wrote my vision statement, I was equal parts excited and then also terrified because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, none of this exists. None of it. None of it. Like, okay, this is going to be a big uphill battle. How am I going to get all the coaching certifications and get certified in things that I'm not certified to teach at? None of it existed. And then my coach was like, you don't have to do it all today. You don't have to quit your job and do it. You can build this at the same time as you are continuing to work. And that idea of it doesn't have to be either or, it could be non binary. It could just decide, like, yes, and that was really appealing to me because I do not actually take a lot of risks in my life. And so I started yoga teacher training right away, actually. Once I made the decision that this is what I was going to do, I don't know if this was your experience, but suddenly doors open,
Yeah.
opportunities came faster than I thought I was even ready. I felt it was like the train had left the station and I was
You
holding
better
on
hop
for dear
on.
life. Yes, I'm hopping on, I'm holding on for dear life.
I love it.
And it was just happening so quickly. And of course, at the same time, getting promoted at work, more people, bigger projects, all this stuff. And I don't know, think that God's testing us, but I definitely felt like, yes, I'll take it and I'll do a great job, but I'm still building this because this doesn't actually motivate me. That's not what's going to motivate me to stay. I'm not going to change my mind. And I waited 2 years. Yeah, October is a big transformation month for me. October is like when I started coaching. Then, like a year later, when I started yoga teacher training, October is when I resigned from my job. So it's interesting, just
Yeah.
the change of leaves and the season and all this stuff. That's what happened. So then I started my business. My last day at work was January 7th, 2019. And
Okay.
then 2 days later, my LLC was active. And there you go.
I love it. I love it. That is so interesting. There's so many things that you said that resonated with me. So I've always called myself a word nerd. I've always had my nose in a book or been writing. And so the writing part, I always had to have work where I was writing. And I thought PR was a great career choice because I'd be telling other people's stories. But I also related to really wanting to help and really wanting to go deep with people. And that's so clear in everything that you write and how you work. And I have listened to your podcast, and that comes through so clearly. And I think you and I aligning. It's so weird now that I'm using that word, how often I was already using it in just
Yeah.
general conversation. But you and I aligning on peace does come from living a life in alignment. And if you're a business owner, that includes your business. And so I love, and I do wonder sometimes, I'm a person of faith as well. I think we've talked about that, but I faced something similar when I wanted to give up PR as a core service. And so we still do PR, but we do real PR with our clients, whereas about a third of our business was coming from people that wanted publicity. And we were doing that. And you and I think, talked about this, but the media industry has drastically changed over the past 5 years. You have people that aren't living in the same city as the publications they write for, and people that are doing 3 part-time gigs as journalists to make ends meet. And it's just not the same. And I didn't want to represent that
Mm.
as something that we can work with you for 3 months and we'll get you featured in these top 5 publications, because it didn't work that way. It's a long-term investment and you have to have the right story. And people just wanted that dopamine hit of getting in a publication. And so I made a very difficult decision to say, we're not doing that as a standalone service, and start turning clients away. But I do feel, because we started getting more clients, just as you talked about getting promoted,
Yeah.
we started getting more people coming to us. And I actually said in a prayer, God, are you telling me I should stay with this? Or are you really testing me to see how bad or how aligned I am with my own integrity of not feeling this is right to take? And of course, I felt like it was the latter. But it was hard. It was hard to say no when all of a sudden there's even an uptick in people that want just that.
Yeah. You know why? I think it's because we've been taught that indicators are things like promotion, more money, more
Yes.
clients, these external validation. I think we just grew accustomed that those are the markers of success, or if things are going right or whatever. But I think it's that internal voice, and it's connecting to the feeling and really getting grounded and centered. Even if we think we want something sometimes, and really saying, how do I feel about this? Or what's the lesson? Or what am I learning here? I think the more that I do that, I don't know, the more authentic I am in my choices and my decisions and things. And even if sometimes people are like, shouldn't you be disappointed by that? And I'm like, maybe, but I'm actually not. It does like a mind trick, right?
It does.
And I have a recent thing that just happened. I was approached by a company to do a speech in March, and I was so excited. Looked like we were going to go through it. They just had to sign the contract and all the stuff. And then this morning, actually, right before we're recording, they were like, oh, we met and we've decided to go in a different direction. And I'm like,
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
Yeah. And it's like soon. So I was like, okay. And so maybe I'll get a response. Maybe I won't. It was just kind of a weird thing. And I just sat with it for a little bit, and I was like, how do I feel about this? And anytime I look back in my life, I just go, I'm just being redirected to something else.
I love that.
I can't really do much about it. I can maybe get some information about, I know the proposal was great. I know it was a decent professional fee, all those things. And I think the old me would probably have been like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have asked that much, or I should be whatever. And now I don't have that response anymore. And I think that that is just the more you practice being in alignment and more trust and surrender to God for me, it
Yeah.
just really takes away a lot of that noise. I don't know if you have like a similar experience or maybe if you have a story like that too.
I do, and I think it's really important. I think part of it for me is alignment. And I hate to say this, but part of the wisdom that comes with experience, which you only get after years of working. So it's not directly related to age, but it is related to the breadth and depth of experiences that you've had that, you can start looking back and seeing, well, this has happened before. I have had a client that's decided to go in a new direction only to realize sometimes 6 months down the road that that was a client that was really sapping a lot of my emotional energy for
Mhm.
whatever reason. They were changing direction all the time, which is usually what it is, or they were treating me like I was supposed to work in a silo, which has occasionally happened where, well, we hired you to do this. Well, yes, but we need to work together. And sometimes you find that no matter how clear you believe you are with expectations and you have the conversation and it's in writing, people hear what they want to hear and they move forward. And then you both have a choice. Is this relationship going to work or not? But I always look at it as it's not my plan, it's God's plan. I find the surrender in that as well. And it's not meant to be because I'm meant to be doing something else. And it doesn't even always mean that a better client is around the corner. Sometimes it means that I need to focus on a different part of my business, working on the business. Or right now, I think I mentioned before we got on, I'm involved in a community project that's trying to push back on some land development that's happening where I live. And it's requiring some energy. So where does that space come from, right? And so I think we all do that. And I think it's important when something that you initially perceive as negative, you look for what does this allow for me, right? And maybe this just wasn't meant for me. But I love how you frame everything. So I want to hear how your clients work with you a little more because we've only talked about this stuff casually.
I
So
know.
yeah, I want to hear all about when clients come into your world, what that looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting because if I were to say, okay, who is my ideal client and kind of talk in those terms, but I'll give you examples of typically when people come to me. So I work with men and women. People always ask, do you just work with women? And I say, no, I've actually had some amazing male clients. And typically they have been people that have worked with me in the past in some capacity.
Mm,
And I've already built some credibility with them, but they've been paying attention. And they'll say, I've been reading your stuff on LinkedIn for the last 7 years. And I'm like, who
wow.
knew? Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't even know. You don't know who's paying attention or who you're impacting or who your post maybe was inspiring to, and they're just waiting for the moment when they feel ready to reach out. So that's typically how I work with men and women. And I would say that probably the majority of the people are in maybe we would call it midlife. I call it the
Right.
prime of our life,
Yeah.
where you've had work experience and life experience and enough confidence and wisdom to start questioning whether the life that you're living is really the one that you want to live for the rest of the time. And so that's been probably 40 to 60 has kind of been the age I would say if on average. But really
Okay.
people come to me because if they want to stay where they are, they might be struggling with some burnout.
Yeah.
They also could be struggling with confidence issues. Maybe they were promoted and they've been successful their entire career. And all of a sudden, they have moved into a new role or a new department or a new leader, and something feels fairly uncomfortable, unknown. They usually will use the words like imposter syndrome, which I actually don't
Mm,
like, and I don't perpetuate that identity. I don't like us taking on those types of labels or identities. And so that's kind of a group of people. And then sometimes people come and they're like me, and where they say, I don't want to do this anymore. And they've
mm,
already made a decision. It is such a knowing so deep in their bones that they
yes.
are not staying, but they don't know what to do next because
Mm,
they haven't spent most of their life figuring that out. They've always been the good corporate employee doing what was expected of them. And then they
yeah.
reach a point for various reasons, right? And so they're having a little bit of an identity struggle. Like, who am I outside of this role? And wanting to get some really clear vision around, what do I want to do? And maybe it's because they want to retire early. Maybe it's just because they can't imagine staying for another 10 to 15 years, whatever it is. And then I also do a lot of business coaching. I have a lot of new entrepreneurs or folks who have chosen to leave corporate. Maybe they already worked with me in the past, figuring out what they want to do. They want to start their own business and not sure exactly where to begin. So pulling in lots of business experience on, how do I start a new business? What does it look like? How do I take it? Make sure that's aligned to what's most important to me, what I want to deliver. So I would say those are probably the three ways or the types of clients that come to me. But I purposely got certified in life coaching, executive coaching, health and wellness, and business because I wanted to pull all that in with the mindfulness, with the meditation, with the yoga, all of those things to be able to customize programs for people exactly where they are. And so we work on their whole self, not just their career, maybe their mindset, but really let's look at all of your life and let's figure out, what is your baseline? What does success even look like? What are your values? What does it mean to live in alignment? And do some of that work. And I love it so much because it's like the work that matters. And when you get so clear on that, anything is possible. Like literally anything is possible, I tell all my clients. I really believe it.
I think that's beautiful. I think you do a lot of the excavation that I do, but on a different level. And so when people come to me, we do look at their childhood. I had someone come to me once and say, I know you want to find something unique about me, but there's really nothing. And I said,
Oh,
okay, challenge accepted. Let's talk about who you are and who you were before you started your business. And he went on to say, well, my parents moved around a lot when I was a kid. I lived in like 5 different countries. And I was like, whoa,
that's typical.
stop right there. Let's unpack that because you understand most people don't grow up living in 5 different countries and cultures. And that gives you experience and a lens that came from that that other people in your space do not have. He was like, oh, I never thought about that because we don't see what's special in ourselves. We're not
Yeah.
trained that way. We're trained to be humble. I do occasionally, well, not any longer. I've been very clear about who I work with, but in the first couple of years, I would have people come to me saying, well, just promote me. I'm a really interesting person. I actually had 2 or 3 people say that to me. And then they would tell me their story from their perspective of what was interesting. And I didn't feel it was terribly interesting, but that's okay.
Yeah. I love that. And it's interesting because we want the business to be a reflection of who we are.
Yes,
Right. And the work that you do allows people to tap into that and to step into who they are, I guess, more authentically, because it's not what we were taught. Even if you took branding classes, like what is your brand within corporate?
right.
You're still building a brand within the culture and the confines of the organization that you're working in. I mean, all of it.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
how wonderful for you to help people. I think it's like a form of freedom to be able to step into that and be like, this is who I am. This is my voice. This is how I speak. How do I refine that to be attractive to the clients that I want to work with? How do I
100%.
be a magnet for the people that naturally will gravitate towards me? Because I always tell my clients, like, coaching is a very intimate relationship. You are going to talk to this person. You're going to share things you're not going to share with your boss, with your coworkers, with your friends. You don't want to talk to your spouse, your partner about all these things. They don't want to listen to it always either. But your coach is someone you should trust and you should want to engage and have these conversations. So, of course, you want the coach to be who they are and their best version too. And then that's a much better match than pretending to be something you're not. And then it never really quite works out.
100%. I think it's like trying on shoes, whether you're finding a coach or a therapist or a
Yeah.
hairdresser. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many times it's like there's nothing wrong with this other person and their clients love them and think they're the best of the best, but they may not be the right fit for you. And
Mhm.
that's why I think it's so incumbent upon business owners to be really clear about their personality and their values and what they stand for and what they stand against so that people, by the time they go to work with them, are 80 to 90% sure that this is the right person. And then it makes it so much easier for both people. The other thing that you touched on that I just want to pin for a minute is the idea of brand. And you said it without saying it, but most people think brand is what they hire someone to create for them. And
Mm.
it's not. Brand is distilling of the essence of the person, determining how much of that you want to bring and show up in your business, because we don't bring every single facet of us to our business, nor should we, which doesn't
Yeah.
mean we're not authentic, but it just means things that are personal. But your brand is everything you create and how you show up in the world, determined by how people perceive and engage with it. So when I take someone through a branding process, we go through how it shows up on the inside. Like, how do you show up even if you don't have a team yet? What is the culture of your organization? All the inside work first, just like you, but it's within the company. And then what is the perception we're going through? And how do we build a customer experience and or a public persona that exemplifies that? So at the end of the day, our brand, which is our reputation, that's the final answer, is that overlap of what we've created and how people engage with it, because that's the real test.
Yeah. It's so good. I love that you said that, distilling the essence of who you are. And I think that's why it's so hard for us to try to do that for ourselves. I remember going through reading a lot of stuff and taking courses, and I didn't know you back then, but I try to piece it together. And even now, as you think about identity changing and identity shifts, which I want to talk to you about, I think that's why it's so important to come back to it again, like you said, every 3 years or so. So
Right.
for me in coaching, I always tell people, if you want to make another big leap, shift, elevation, whatever that is in your business and who you are and how you show up in the world, it is an identity shift first. And you have to see yourself
Mhm.
in that place. And then all of your choices and decisions should align to where you are going. And that could mean wearing different clothes. It could mean new healthy habits that are going to support the person that you are becoming. It could mean making investments that maybe you aren't prepared to make yet, but that are going to be necessary to get to where you want to go. It could mean a refresh of the way the world externally views you. So tell me about how you talk about identity. And if someone comes to you and says, you know what, I've been in business for the last 7 years, say it's me, and here's where I see myself going, here's where I see the next 10 years, how would you help them to really say, okay, this is the new identity, or how we elevate from where you currently are today?
I love that you're asking that. And I love that this is yet another parallel,
Yeah.
because I tell my clients that their brand is always somewhat aspirational. But then I always talk to them about, how do you become the person your dreams require? How
Yeah.
do you become the business that your dreams require?
Hmm.
Maybe if you were only working 4 days a week, you need to work 6 days a week for a while. I am not a fan of hustle culture. However, there are times in every business where the owner needs to hustle. And it's usually when you want to get to a new elevation. You have to start from scratch in many, many ways. So when I am doing this from a brand perspective, I also do it from a growth perspective, because I know what it means to grow. I am not a business coach, but I am saying, to be perceived like this and to make this, what are the day-to-day things in your business that need to change? We talk about scheduling. We talk about how to build in time to do the new kind of content, to do the new positioning, to go back to old clients and get perspectives from them. When I'm doing one-on-one branding, I interview people's clients. Because,
Hmm.
like you said, you cannot read the label from inside the container, nor can I. So I work with a couple of partners when I'm leveling up, and I talk to my clients, my more recent clients, and the ones that I've had for a long time, to say, how has our relationship changed? How have you seen me change? Because it's not just coming from me, it's coming through me. And other people have perspectives that can strengthen mine. So I do work a little bit more holistically when people are leveling up their identity. And that's when we look at did they build the right foundation to begin with?
Mm.
So sometimes I'm trying to think of an example. Let's just say that you have a restaurant group and you have different restaurants with different personalities, but what you really want to do is build in nutrition consulting. Maybe one of your restaurants is based on healthy eating. And as a side of that, the owner has really gotten into, because we know people in the restaurant business, they don't eat well, they don't sleep well. So maybe this person has gone through an evolution. And so we have to go back to the foundation of their brand. And we might have to make some significant changes to the brand at that point. And that is an identity shift. But the owner's already gone through the identity shift himself or herself. And now we're taking that and saying, how do we share that? And there's a lot of great opportunity when an owner goes through a shift. And hopefully they'll have worked with someone like you to understand that. But then when they come to me, it's like, okay, so here's the personal story we're going to tell about why you're making this shift. Here's where that story needs to be, including on their website. Like if they're changing their brand foundation, that's a bigger lift than just elevating to the next level. And so we look at that from a holistic lens. What does this mean for your brand? What does this mean from the other brands within? We have an architecture. So you have a parent brand and you may have child brands like your retreats. You may brand as a child brand within your company. It won't be all your clients that are interested in that, but there's a group. The same thing with this restaurant group that's now going into nutrition consulting. There will be a subset, probably the people that hang out at that one particular restaurant, but it won't be their entire market. And so that's an identity shift that we help clients make, usually not that drastically, but occasionally. And it's really starting with your brand foundation built to expand in the beginning. Was it an umbrella that it can encompass change, or was it very specific, in which case we have to look at, is this an expansion or is this actually a new parent, a second parent? And hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. There are so many similarities here. I love it. And of course there are, because we're talking about human beings and we're still trying to, as you said, distill the essence of who we are. I'm curious how your definition of success has changed over the years.
Drastically.
Yeah.
Drastically. I started out when I was in school, I was told you go into PR and you can go into nonprofit, or if you want to make a difference, you will go into nonprofit. And if you want to ascend a corporate ladder and have the typical trappings of success, you go into corporate. And I thought, well, I want to make a difference. So I went into nonprofit and I spent time working in nonprofit and was elevated, was actually offered in my mid 20s the role of executive director, which I turned down to take a different job in corporate. And within 3 years of working in corporate, I tripled the salary that I left at my nonprofit. I was like, well, this is good. This enables me to have a child, buy a house, those kind of things. And I found that I went back and forth over my work together. And I think that pursuing that, finding out what success really means. And for me, it was, I couldn't reconcile the two. And that's what I realized when I started my business. But then, even then, I got in the trappings. I told my husband early on, I want to have an office that's in a community where we have a storefront. I want to be physically part of the community. And so after a couple of years, we found a space, we rented it, we outgrew it. My team grew. I thought, I want a team of 10 to 15 people. That's what I want. That feels good to me. I don't want to have 50 people. I don't want to build big. I want to build small and intimate. So my husband and I bought a building that had a storefront that was like 2.5 times the size of the space that we had rented. And I had the team of 10 and I owned the building, and COVID hit. And so there was really a lot of reckoning as to what's really important. No one could come into the office, obviously. I went. It was a lot of space for one person.
Yeah.
And so the end of 2021, my team had gotten smaller. I had to make some tough decisions. Some of them were hybrid. I had two interns that had been working for me in two different states that when we went into lockdown, I said, you can stay as long as you need to. You're not going to be able to find your first job. They were both graduating, they were last term seniors. You can stay as long as you want because you're not going to be able to find your first job unless you have a job. And so if you stay here even a year, you'll have had your first job. And they both did that. But the bigger thing was, I realized that the big team was fun, but wasn't how I imagined it to be. And in fact, after the team shrank, we actually had our best year in business because the people who remained were more experienced. And that was really hard for me because my identity was wrapped up in giving people their first jobs. But I realized that it had really hurt the bottom, not only the bottom line, but even the top line of the business because it was taking a lot more time to get things done. And so I restructured that. The bigger one was that my husband and I had always dreamed of having a cottage on Lake Erie where we could go in the summer to a summer place where we had gone for years. And he said to me, we could sell the building and get the cottage. And I said, done. And he looked at me and he's like, are you sure? You've talked about this building for a very long time. So my idea of success changed because of experience, but also because of the pandemic. And I think for a lot of people, their idea of success changed because they went through something very scary that made them rethink what really mattered.
Absolutely. I think that was a reckoning for so many of us. It's because we had to get still enough to ask ourselves those questions. And when some of the things are taken away that you thought you absolutely needed or were so important, then you could just sit there and go, wait a second, is this really all that important? Does this matter? Or what am I gaining here instead? And I think we gained so much during that time. I just thought, wow, I love having dinner with my family and I love spending more time outside in my backyard. And I think that my morning walks and just being outside and really relishing that and just being so grateful for it because it was something that wasn't taken away was just really important. But I also think with time, we can ask ourselves those things. And sometimes you have to achieve the things that you thought that you wanted in order to say, wow, I actually don't feel the way that I thought that I would.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then that's where you go, what was I actually chasing? What was the feeling that I thought that I would get from this? And it's like freedom. Time in the summer, that feels amazing, right? It's the freedom to be able to work from anywhere and working with great people. Maybe it's higher profit. Who knows? All those
Right.
things, like we get to decide. And I think that when we start asking ourselves the questions, and this is a lot of the work I do with my clients, is what does success mean to you? Because
So important.
it's so important because then all of our choices that we make, they're either going to be aligned to that or they're not. And don't be surprised that if you're making decisions and choices based on someone else's expectations or definitions of success, if you're miserable, if you're burned out, if you're exhausted, if you're not having a great time, those things are going to happen. But when you make the small shift and you go, wow, I didn't realize how important it was for me to just be able to sit and eat my lunch in peace with no meetings and just be able to hang out with the dog or whatever the things are. Those are the little things that add up to being the big things.
I also think this, and let me know what you think. I also think because I loved having the team at the time and I loved having my building and we were part of the community and we would be outside and people would stop by. But I started to think of it like this and tell me if this makes sense. I have always wanted to travel to certain places in the world and I've gone there and I've never been disappointed. I've loved the experience, but I didn't want to stay there. I went for the experience. And once I had it, I realized as great as it was, I didn't need to have it forever. So I'm so grateful that I had the team that I did. And I'm so grateful that we had that building and we're part of the community, but I didn't need to have them forever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. It wasn't home. And like you said, it was more of an experience. You learn from it. You can look back on it fondly. It doesn't mean it was a mistake. I mean, I say that all the time, tell people, because sometimes we think, oh, I wish I'd left sooner. I wish I'd taken a chance on myself sooner. And I say, but nothing is wasted. If you really believe that nothing is wasted, that you can use every good or bad or challenging experience for good going forward, you will see it as such, and you will be able to capitalize on all of those things. So and you're just going to be a happier person if you think that. And if you approach life that way, like, oh,
Right.
okay, I learned
Yeah.
from it. That's okay. I don't regret it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you work with all your clients one-to-one? I know you also do retreats. Can you talk about like how you work with different clients?
Yeah, I do one-on-one, and then I also do a lot of corporate programs. So I love to work with organizations either virtually or in person and really customize programs based on what it is that they need. During COVID, I started doing a lot of resilience programs or focusing in on all things topics related to like the individual, then the team, then the organization. I think that too often we've gone through like leadership training or focusing in on things that would just benefit maybe the organization, still the leader, but more tied towards like that lens. And I love creating programs where it's like, let's focus on you. How do you
Mm,
become the best version of yourself? So you show up as that person at home and at work to be the leader for your team, then set that tone, and then of course in alignment to the overall corporate goals, and being able to teach people how to be more resilient, how to give themselves permission to focus on the things that are needed, boundaries, focusing in on their health, whatever it is, that just really allows me to scale in a larger way too, and also see that the people are really happy and their companies are happy. And then I do retreats, which I love to do because it combines my love of travel and curating wonderful experiences with pulling in the yoga, the meditation, the coaching, curating these wonderful experiences. And I love doing retreats because I think that when we are put in uncomfortable situations, meaning we're not at home, we're sharing a broader space with other people that we may not know,
right.
where sometimes we're traveling by ourselves or maybe with someone else, but that's where real transformation happens, because you're not going to go and go do your email or go do laundry or kind of distract yourself with these things. You're going to be in an environment that is all about growth and transformation or focusing in on yourself. So I love doing retreats, and we're going to Croatia. I'm doing 2 in Croatia with a friend of mine this time. So I won't have to facilitate just on my own, which is great. But we're doing 2 weeks, which is so fun.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, so the first one is co-ed. She lives in Croatia, so she's got a lot of European clients, and I'm bringing some Americans. The second week is all women, so it's going to be pretty awesome. She's a psychotherapist, so she's going to do a lot of inner child healing, and I'll bring in and do a lot of mindfulness and coaching circles and visioning, as well as somatic breath work and yoga. And then we'll do some fun things that you can do, like island hop and all of those things. I did Morocco last year. I did Portugal twice. I've done Tuscany. So Ireland, Northern Ireland. It's just so fun. And
Yeah, that's
every retreat is different because of the location. So
and
what
because the people, right? Because the
and the
chemistry of the
people,
people, right?
chemistry people, and the people who want to go to Northern Ireland and be in the forest all the time and with horses or whatever are different than the people who want to be in Marrakesh and Morocco, maybe,
True. Yeah.
or versus Tuscany in a villa. And so I think that the location and then the people that are naturally gravitate towards it, what I curate in terms of the entire experience,
Right.
it's just like a unique, it's like a unique retreat, I think, based on all that. Yeah.
Who attends these retreats? Are they people that have been previous clients, or do you get a lot of people that you haven't even talked to before that decide they want to participate?
I don't think that I've ever had anyone that I didn't know unless it was a client or a friend who was coming that was inviting someone
Okay.
that they were
That makes
close to.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's typically people that have been in my community or a friend or a past colleague, or it's interesting, right? Even now, I just ran into someone I had met back in 2007 at an event, and she said, "Oh, where are you going this year?" Like, it was just so casual.
That's so great. Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, I'm going to Croatia." She's like, "Oh my God, that's been on my bucket list. Let me reach out to our other friend who's another past someone I used to work with. And they registered like within 2 days. And then I saw 2 friends at church this weekend, and he's like, "Do you have a co-ed one?" He's like, "I think my wife and I want to come." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, the first
Right.
one." So you just never know sometimes where it who's paying attention to the stories or the posts or the newsletter, and they're just waiting for the right time to say, "You know what? I think I'm going to do this."
I love that. Do you have a favorite story of a client, whether from retreat or a personal coaching client that you think really exemplifies the work that you do? I know that's a tough question to be put on the spot with.
Gosh, you know what? I don't know if I have a favorite, but I'm trying to think of some interesting ones. I will tell you this one is funny. I have worked with young adults. I have such a really soft spot for young adults, but my first client was my investment banker at the time, his son. And he had sent him to me because his son wanted to make a change in terms of college and all these things, but he didn't know why. And so he'd like left
Ah,
school. So I worked with him, and what I found out was that he was in a major that he didn't want. It was in pre-med, and only because he was really smart, really good at school. Somebody, his counselor and others told him that this was going to be a good choice for him. And when we spent some time doing the work asking, like, what does your future look like? What do you actually want to do? At the end of the day, he wanted to have a family. He wanted to coach his kids' softball games. He wanted to be home for dinner all the time. Money wasn't like a big motivator. We just really got to wait a second. Being a physician would definitely not allow you to do all these things that were so core to who you are and what you wanted. And then when we started to dig a little bit deeper about what he really enjoyed as a young person, because we always leave clues of what we enjoy. He loved taking things apart, putting them back together, super curious, inquisitive. And so had him enroll in a local school for a semester, take a couple of different types of classes based on some other options. Loved engineering. And then in the fall, sign up at a local school that was closer. It was only a couple hours away because he didn't want to be as far away as he was,
that makes
and
sense.
was able to sign up in the major that he wanted. I think it financially, it made more sense than even where he was before. And it was just one of those examples of like, if you just ask the right questions, we know the answers. They're always within us. It's just that we don't ask the right questions. And this is similar at any age. In this case, you've got a guidance counselor who's probably responsible for 300, 400 kids. Who knows, right? At a high
Right.
school, they can never go deep enough. They're going to say, oh, well, it looks like you're pretty good at math and science. You're a great student.
Exactly.
Why don't you just become a doctor and make a bunch of money? And it's like, that's not necessarily what we want. So young adults, I always have such a soft spot for them, probably because I have adult children, and it's
Right.
like really important to get to those types of questions. And then similar story, another friend, someone that I knew, and sent me his spouse, and we worked together, and it started off for stress management and burnout. And then it turned into their job was eliminated. And so suddenly at an age where he thought, wow, I'm going to retire from this place
Right.
and I'm going to make, I think we had these dreams, like I'm going to just work this many more years, retire, etc. And then suddenly say, well, who am I outside of this role that I've been in for decades? And what do I do now? What are my transferable skills? What are those things that I can bring forward? We focused first on taking care of the stress of the burnout, on really the impact to their nervous system that they've been stressed that they were under, and then started going and digging a little bit deeper into what really mattered. And they love where they are right now. They are thriving. They're doing
Yeah.
fantastic. They love everything about it. I still keep in touch with them. And it's just an example that one, it's never too late to make a change.
Right.
Two, just because you've done something, I don't care how long, for decades, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that you can do if it doesn't bring you joy. And three, you can absolutely step into a new identity and figure out what that is at any age. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I think that those things just bring me so much joy and satisfaction because that's what my coach gave me
I love that.
in my late 40s. when I worked with her. And that's what I love doing with others. And I would say that when you're able to do that at an older age and you have the wisdom and you have the experience and you've got hopefully some support and you've made some good decisions when you were younger, that gives you a little bit more freedom and flexibility. It's incredible what we're able to do and the
I love
impact we
that
can
you
make in the world.
Yes, yes, yes. No, I'm really struck by you said that we can change at any age because my first thought was, well, we already are changing at every age. And so why not get perspective on what that could mean for our life? And I think about changing from being a single person working to having children and trying to balance that to becoming an empty nester. And I don't know if you're an empty nester yet or not, but we have moved since my girls went away, but I used to keep their bedroom doors closed. My first one went away to college and I couldn't bear to walk by her room, so I kept the door closed. My second one went away to college 3 years later. I had both rooms closed. I could not bear to open the door and go in those rooms. My transition from having children to being an empty nester was one of the hardest transitions I ever went through. And I think it makes so much sense to have a touchstone, a person that you can talk to as you're making those changes. Like I had this huge space in my life open up. I had all this love that had been pouring into two people that were no longer part of my day to day life. What do I do with that? Well, I ended up getting dogs, but that's a story for another day. I'm a caretaker. So I was like, oh, but lots of other things as well. But having guidance then probably would have been really helpful. I didn't talk to a therapist because I thought, well, this is normal. Then, of course, later you find out some people are very happy when their kids go away to school, not because they didn't love them, but they feel like they can finally get on with their own life, which is also true. It's a both and.
Yep.
But I love that you said that because that makes so much sense. And that's how I feel about business. You're always changing. So if you're not reflecting that in your business in some way, there might be an issue and it might start feeling stressful and you might start feeling burned out because you're no longer in alignment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Lorraine, I've just enjoyed our conversation so much. And I do ask a final question, and maybe you have one for your podcast too, but
Yeah.
what does it mean to you to live the width of your life?
I think living the width of my life means that I examining it from a perspective, not a 10,000 foot view, because I can't quite get clearly on that. But I really want to make sure that I'm putting in the big rocks first. And so that comes from where I spend my emotional time, where I spend my physical time when I can. My girls are, one's in Manhattan and one's in Honolulu. And of course, I'm here in Cleveland, Ohio. So the physical time is not always available to me, but I do that and I reassess on a regular basis. And to me, that's really important because we can get out of alignment. I can say, well, my biggest rock is my relationship with my husband, but then I find, gosh, we have not had any one-on-one time in like 3 days. And then you have to reassess, well, am I being true? Am I living in alignment to what I say is most important?
Yeah, so good. So, so good. Well, I am just so grateful for our time together. And if people want to work with you, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
They can reach out to me through the prosperforpurpose.com website or just send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'll give you those and you can put them in the show notes and I'll flip that question to you and then I'll ask you a last question.
Yeah, if anyone wants to work with me, they can go to my website because you'll get links to everything there, including my books and the podcast services that I offer. So AnetaKuzma.com. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn and Instagram too, but I would say mostly LinkedIn. And then, of course, you might find some videos of the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, that's great. So as you look at your life, and this is kind of a broad question too, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think I want my legacy to be that I just loved people, that I used every skill, gift, and experience that God gave me, good, bad, challenging, and that I was able to turn it into something useful and helpful for others so that they can live the width of their life. I see myself as a vessel for God to work through. And when I remember that, then I kind of get out of my own way and release all the stuff that takes up too much space and that prevents, I think, God to work through me. That's what my legacy hopefully will be.
That's beautiful. I think that is something that I would write down and probably post somewhere for myself because that was so beautiful. It
Oh,
was so beautiful. I love it so much. And thank you for having this important conversation with me. I feel like this was a conversation that did go deep. It wasn't just, let's talk about our business, but you and I have really found so much in common in how we approach our work and how we look at life that I hope we will continue this conversation.
absolutely. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Aneta.